Howdy friends and neighbors, how's it going? Dave Peterson here, Dave's Guitar Planet, with the third guitar story that I'm filming. I did my Stratocaster and my Telecaster, and this one is a 1974-75 Gibson Howard Roberts custom archtop. You might know that Howard Roberts was a studio musician in Los Angeles a long time ago. He played on all kinds of TV shows and stuff. And he played a black guitar, the famous black guitar that started off as a Gibson Charlie Christian Model 350 or something like that. But he had a cutaway put into it and another little space here and all sorts of custom work done on it. Somebody owns that somewhere now, but Epiphone approached him. Epiphone was owned by Gibson at the time, asked him to help make a Howard Roberts custom guitar. And for some reason he decided on this oval sound hole instead of having F holes. So the guitar, if I turn the volume all the way off, doesn't quite play like a round hole acoustic guitar, but it's a little bit reminiscent of that. Anyway, I was living in Berkeley, California in the early 2000s, and there was a music store named Blue Note Music, which closed a few years ago. And the owner was kind of an egotist, but there was a lot of nice guitars in there, and he did know a few things about jazz and guitars. And hanging up on the wall was this guitar, and I guess I can tell you that they wanted $2,000 for it, and I took it down and played it and kind of fell in love with it, decided I had to have it. And I haven't done anything to it really. Excuse me. It's got the original frets. I left my tuner on here because temperature changes in my room and it kind of goes out of tune. But it's got abalone inlay in the head here, this vine inlay, which is kind of cool. When I bought it, it had great big heavy locking tuners on it, so I took it to a guy and I asked him for the lightest tuners he had, and he put on these Japanese Goto tuners, which are very light and they work fine. It's got a three-piece neck, maple neck, laminated. It has this feature here, which is, I tried to find the name for this thing. Some violins and stuff have this feature. Doesn't bother me one way or the other, but it's kind of interesting. I think when I got it, it had the strap pin right there, and I changed it to here, which I prefer. It's maple sides and back, and a laminated, I think, maple top. It's got the one humbucker that's floating on the end of the neck. It's not in the body like it would be on a Gibson 175 or something. Mother of pearl rectangular slotted inlays in the neck. It has the same bridge as on my Super 400, an ebony bridge. This one is carved to be compensated, and I realized that I should really put a wound G string, third string, on here, because the compensation is assuming I'm going to have a wound G string, and so I think that's one of the reasons I'm having a little problem tuning with it. Got the floating the trapeze tailpiece with the badge on there that has Howard Roberts' name and a rosewood piece of wood. Volume and a treble roll-off and a mid-range roll-off, I was reading. It's got I think 7-piece binding around it, which is kind of nice. Quite a pretty guitar. I made a big mistake with it one day. I was in upstate New York in the middle of the winter, and I went to this guitar clinic up by one of the Great Lakes just east of Rochester. And the guitar was in the case in my trunk, and then I took it into this high school, I think it was, where they were having the guitar clinic. And I opened up the case, forgetting that you need to open the case and then close it and wait a few minutes and then open it and then close it and wait a few minutes to let the guitar acclimate to the the warmer temperature of the room. Well, I didn't do that, and I got a bunch of surface checking. They're kind of like striped cracks that pretty sure it happened that day, unfortunately. So that decreased some of the value of the guitar a bit, I'm sure. And then while it was in upstate New York, I had it stored in our boathouse in a cardboard box. It was in the case and then in a cardboard box, and just stayed there for a few years. And that's very dry up there, and a chunk of the finish right here chipped off the neck. It doesn't bother me, but someday I might have a luthier repair that. Anyway, it's a very clear sounding guitar. I've used it with a thumb pick. I have one of these Fred Kelly slick picks that I went through a bunch of thumb picks and decided I like this one. It gives a nice clear bass for finger picking, like. Chet Atkins' version of Bojangles. So it's quite a versatile guitar. You can do a little bit of kind of a country. Use a pick for a little jazzy style. A little bit of country bluegrass. Some kind of a pop chord stuff. So it has what's called a Florentine Cutaway. That's the sharp ones, and the rounded cutaway would be called the Venetian Cutaway. A couple of terms that Gibson came up with, apparently. Epiphone made the original Howard Roberts model, and it was very similar to this, but it had a carved spruce top, and this one has a laminate top. A lot of jazz players actually prefer the laminate tops. Number one, they're cheaper usually than the hand-carved spruce, and they're more durable. You know, they're not as prone to cracking or getting damaged, and they don't feedback as much. So I prefer, or I've got a couple guitars with a laminate top, jazz arch tops. It had a pick guard, a faux tortoiseshell pick guard, which I removed because my style, I don't like my fingernails clicking on it for recording and stuff. So I took that off, but when I took it off, there was a little hole where a wire comes out of the pickup and goes down, and then there was a hole for the screw on the pick guard. There's another one on the side. So what I did is I took a digital camera and snapped a picture of this area and printed out onto some sticker paper and then cut it out, and so these little pieces of paper are pictures of the area right there. So that's kind of how I disguised that. So one of the takeaways is, if you live in the northern part of the US, you need to put a humidifier in the case or put it in a room with a humidifier because it gets extremely dry there, or if you're living anywhere where in the winter the humidity drops because it gets really cold, it can wreak havoc with finish and stuff like that. And if you take it out of a cold car, for example, into a warm room, you have to lift the lid and then put it back down, wait a few minutes, lift it, put it back down, let it slowly acclimate to the room. That way the finish in the wood will kind of expand at the same rate. Otherwise, if you just open the lid, the finish will expand and the wood won't, so the finish is going to just crack. Something like that. Anyway, you can get all sorts of bad cracks that way. Alrighty, that's my 1974 or 75 Gibson Howard Roberts custom archtop.